You should ask to raise your hand.
Uh, if you can hear me, can you raise your hand?
Okay, I think they're still setting up the mic
Okay,
thing.
sure.
We are ready, sir.
Okay. So I just want to thank you guys for joining. This will be a introduction to Python lesson. Um, I will continue. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Raise your hand if you can see my screen.
Or just give a thumbs up. Or you can
Okay,
just say it out
yeah.
loud.
Um,
Okay. I could see it, so I think
okay.
that would be good, yeah.
So, this project that we'll be working on today is called Hello World, and it's part of the Introduction to Python course. So, there's a lot to cover today. So I'll go one by one and be pretty quick and try to give as many examples as I can. Um, if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, I will continue. So, hello everyone. My name is Nihal Yerubandi. I am in Texas, and I hope to give you a great lesson today. We will continue. So, what is Python and why are we learning it? So, Python is very, very similar to English. Out of all the languages that are used today, this one is definitely the easiest to learn. In my opinion, it's very similar to English and it's useful in basically every single industry. It's very popular right now. Actually, it is the biggest language, programming language used currently because it is very useful in AI. I will continue. So today in this lesson, we will learn how to print things into the terminal, basic math operations and inputs, and then also a little bit of the random library so that we can roll a virtual dice. So the first function that we will look at today is the print function. So the print function will take the text that you see on the screen and print it into the terminal. What's good about the print function is that you can put basically any input into it and you'll get some output. It's very good for displaying information and debugging so you can see your steps. So I'll show you a little bit of how a print function might look like. So this is how you would make a print function. So you would say print, and then you would use open and close parentheses. Then inside of that, if you want to use text, we can use the quotations, and then we can put some text inside of it. So for example, we can do the simple or the first hello world script. And so as you can see, we'll get a hello world output in the text output area. So you can also repeat these. Oh, you can also repeat these. Uh, we can also repeat these. Hello world two. And it'll print right underneath that. So you can also repeat this as many times as you want, and it'll repeat. So hello world two, hello world two. So that's just a little bit about the print function. So the next thing that we will look at is the math and variables section. So Python can do millions of operations per second. So for example, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, these are gonna be your basic arithmetic operations. And Python can do them basically instantly, which is why programming languages are so commonly used today. So math itself is very good, but in order to save our outputs, we need something called variables. So variables basically store data while the program is running. So I can show you what a variable might look like. So for example, this is what a variable would look like. where x is equal to 3 or y is equal to 2. Here, I'll show it better in the code editor. I will delete, actually, I'll just keep it. So let's say we wanted to make a variable. So we will say a is equal to 3. So now I have assigned a value to the variable a. And in order to see it, what I can do is I can print it out. So let's say print a. And what will happen is underneath these two print statements, I defined a and then I printed it out. So you see how the value 3 is now used instead of a. So what I can also do, for example, is basically what's happening is instead of a, we're printing 3. So if I were to delete this, we're printing 3, but we're naming it a. And so now a is the same thing as 3. So I hope you get that. It's a very fundamental concept. If it's a little bit confusing, you'll get it eventually. So what's good about variables is that they can store multiple different types of data. So for example, I will make a variable called b, and I will store a string in it. So let's say I'm going to store the string hello. I'm just going to delete this line so it doesn't get too cluttered. So I'll make a variable b, and I'll store this value inside of b. So when I print b, I will print hello. And so this is the same thing as me saying hello. Oops. This is the same thing as me saying hello. I'm just replacing it with b. So you can see how that leads to the same output. The last thing I'll show you with functions is functions can, with variables is variables can equal other variables. So for example, I want my b to equal a. So what this will do is b is not going to be equal to hello anymore. Instead, it's going to be equal to a. And a is equal to 3. So there's a lot of steps happening here, but if you put it one by one, it'll make sense. And so a is equal to 3. So we're printing 3. Then b is equal to hello. But then b is equal to a. So b is now equal to 3 because a is 3. And so we'll get 3 and 3 again. I know that was a lot to understand with words. I hope the visual demonstration helps a little bit, but this is a very fundamental concept with any programming language, just variables. And there's also different data types that we'll get into hopefully in later lessons. So, let's go into a little bit of math too. So in Python, you can do a lot of math very, very quickly. So let's say I wanted to do 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 is equal to 5, okay? And then you can also do order of operations. So what this should print out is 20. If you know your PEMDAS or I know there's many different ways to say it, but it should be like parentheses, exponents, or like, it's difficult to use text, but it'll use your order of operations. So this, your multiplication, will happen before your addition, and then you'll get an output in order. And what's really good about programming languages is that you can do math with really, really big numbers really, really quickly. Oh, that might have been too big. Oh,
Yeah, because this
but
is it's because it's an
yeah,
online
it's
editor.
exponent.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can do really big computations really, really quickly. Sorry about that. So that's one of the main benefits with using a programming language is you can just do your math incredibly, incredibly quickly. I'll continue on. And there's a lot more operations. There's going to be like floor, modulo, negative, et cetera, et cetera. We can get into these later. So now we're going to start using a library. So this is a little bit of a jump and kind of separate from what we were working on before. But this library is essentially a different bit of code that you can use to simplify your life, basically. So in order to use a library, we can use the from, or you can use import, but we'll use from right now. So we'll say from date time, import date time. And so what we can do with this is if we go here, let's say we can make a variable a is equal to date time dot now. And then you have to include these parentheses at the end. And so now if I print a, we'll get the current date and the time for me currently. So July 24th. So this is the basics of using a library. If you were to code this yourself, it's probably possible, but it would be a very big pain. And so this simplifies your life considerably. See, in 2 lines of code, I was able to get the current date and time, and it changes every single second continuously. So I'll continue from that. This is just what I did here. So now we will use the random library. So the random library is another library that we can use. So at the top of your file, we can just say import random. And so using random, you'll get a whole different bit of code that you can use. Or actually, I'll use from random import rand. So what we can do here is say b is equal to rand int, and then we can give it a range. So the range that I want is 1 to 10, let's say. So if I print b, what will happen is it will pick a random number between 1 and 10. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It'll be all the numbers. And so if I were to run it, I would get 7. And if I run it again, I'll get 1. And run it again, I'll get 2. And so we're saving the rand int value inside B, and then we're printing, and then we're getting a number out. And so if I were to click it a bunch of times, we'll get a different number every single time. And this goes from 1 to 10, including 10. Oops. Okay. I'll also, yeah, okay. We're gonna put everything we did together and put it into one thing, hopefully. So the reason I got to here so quickly is because there's a big jump between this and making our complete project. So the first thing that I have to teach you additionally is something called a function. This is similar to in Scratch where you can make your own blocks. It's very similar to that. And basically, we can use functions to simplify our code and make it neater. It allows for a lot of reusability, and it just makes our life a whole lot easier, just like our libraries. So for example, let's make a function called hello world, and we're going to give it an input. And I want this function to print hello world. And so if I were to call this by doing hello world, which is the name of this function, it will run the print command underneath it. What's very important with functions as well is to make sure that they're lined up. Whenever you have a colon or something like that under a group of code, you should tab, or else it won't function the same way. It'll actually error. So if I were to run this, the hello world function will go to here, and then it'll print hello world. So if I were to run that, I would get the output of hello world. I hope that makes sense. What we can do as well is we can just say print another thing. So print hi, and then now we'll print hi underneath it. With functions, you can also put in an input. So this is going to get a little bit more confusing, but let's say I want to put the random function inside of here. So what this will do is every single time I call the hello world function, it will print hello world, and then it'll assign a random value to b. Then what I can do is return b. So if I do this, that's probably fine. Then if I print it, then I will print hello world, assign a random value to b, then I'll return b. When I return b, this closes the function. It's gone. And then that b value, which had a number in it, will be printed. So step by step, again, let me just, I can just delete this for now. The function hello world, when called, will print hello world again, assign a random value between 1 through 10 to b, and then return b. And that will be printed by this statement. So for example, I'll get 6. And in order to make this easier, let's say C is equal to hello world. And then now B, when returned, will be assigned to C. So it's pretty difficult until you play around with it to sort of grasp. There's a lot of steps happening one by one. It just takes some practice to getting used to. So there's one last thing I want to do with a function, and I want to input a value into the function. So how we're going to do that is using the input function. How we're going to do that is using the input function. So in Python, you can do something called input, and then inside you can put a text. So let's say I want to put how many sides, colon, and then we'll put a space after them. So currently, if I do that, it'll say input, and then it's going to ask me for an output. And I can say, I want 9 or 10. And when I press 10 and press enter, it'll close, and then the program will be finished because I never did anything with input. So what I can do is say A is equal to input. And so now we can say how many sides, and then we can say, I want 10 sides. And now it will print 10. So if I were to combine that with the strings or with the print functions that we've already used, I can say the dice will have the dice will have 10 sides. You can also replace these commas. It's probably easier with addition. So what this is doing is it's saying the dice will have, and then a space, then it's using the input A, putting A right there. 10 is equal, A is equal to 10. So 10 will go there. And then sides, which will finish off the statement. So here you can see how we're using a combination of the quotations and the numbers together to get a complete output. Now I will get to inputting stuff into the function. So the last thing before we complete the project is inputting something or get to starting the project is inputting something into a function. So let me just make a better naming scheme here. So I'll say user input is equal to input, how many sides? Then I will put user input as an input into the function. And then I can say that. So what this is going to do, and let me print that out. What this is going to do one by one, it's going to skip this function because we haven't called it yet. Then it's going to go down to user input. Then user input is equal to input how many sides. So if I were to run it, I want to say 10 sides. So user input is equal to 10. So now this would be equal to 10. Okay, and then now I'll say hello world 10. And what will happen here is that we'll go to this function and say this is equal to 10. And I named this one X. You can name it user input again if you wanted to. But then whenever using an input to a function, you have to use the same name that you used up here. So I'm going to use user input again. So now if I were to do all of this together, oops, and say 10. Oops, these data types cannot be joined. Oh. So the issue with that was when I did input how many sides, it assumed the value would be a word like 10, but 10 isn't the same thing as the word 10 isn't the same thing as the number 10. So they're different things. And so what I did to that is I said that 10 is now going to be turned into 10. If I wanted to showcase that better, so when I run this, both of these will look the same. But for this one, this is a number. And for this one, this will be the word 100. So they're different in computer language. And so when you're programming, you have to make sure that you're keeping track of what type you are using. So here I made the mistake of assuming the input would be a number when when it was actually a word. So if I were to go through this again, if I say how many sides and put 10 and assign 10 into user input. So now user input is equal to 10, then A is equal to hello world of the user input. So user input this input would be 10, which means this would be 10, and this would also be 10, because they're all the same thing. So when I call this function, it'll go up to here. It will print the hello world line, then it'll go to here. Then rand int will choose a random number between 1 and 10 and assign that value to B. Then that will return, the function will return B as A. And you can also just print this out to make it easier. Oops. And then, so if I were to say I want like 1,000, 10,000 sides, it will go down here and pick a random number between 1 and 10,000. So here, for example, the value I got was 6,559 because it picked a random number between 1 and 10,000. So that was a lot to cover. I understand that you most likely didn't get all of that, and it just takes a lot of practice and playing around to get used to it. Over time, you'll understand how everything works, and it'll make a lot more sense. What I recommend after today is to play around. The slides, I'll try to see if the slides can be given to you because they have some example code. You can also search up a lot of stuff yourself and just play around and see what happens. So the final thing that we're going to do today is the actual project. So what I did under here is I commented all of this out and I made this before the lesson today. So let me just move all this up. So delete this. We're gonna go one by one through this final part of the project, and I'll explain to you how this works and how it puts everything together. So at the top, we have our libraries. So this is the same stuff that we were doing before. And it should look pretty similar to, or it should look exactly the same as what we did earlier in this lesson. So these just are, they're called libraries, and in here they're called modules. So these libraries and modules, they're small snippets of code, and they make your life easier and faster and just simpler in general. This is a showcase of some variables. So for example, the world variable is assigned this value, the Python variable is assigned this value, the fire variable is assigned this value. Whenever you see these hashtag symbols, these are comments. So, and also whenever you see these, is that three? Yeah, whenever you see these three quotation marks, these are multi-line comments. So I'll show you the difference between a normal comment and a comment and a normal line of code. So if I then say print hello world, and I did hashtag print hello world, you'll see that hello world will run. But because there's a hashtag, this is just a comment. So it isn't treated as code and it's skipped. So there's no output. So if I were to delete this top one and just run hashtag print hello world, I would get no output. And these three quotations in a row, they assign a big block of quotations. So let's say I had like print hello, or I had print hello world done multiple times in a row. And I don't want to go hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. So what I can do instead, is okay. What I can do instead is use a multi-line comment. And so that will print, or that will get rid of everything in that section. And so none of this will run, and it will run only this. If I get rid of this. None of this will run, and this line will run instead of all of this. If I were to get rid of them, then you'll see that all of the hello worlds will appear. So that is what I'm using right here. They're very good for explaining what your code is doing. So like, for example, here, it's saying these are emoji variables. And then this is just a little help that you can use in your project and some other useful characters. So under here is this a sample project that I made before the session. So there should be some similar stuff that you remember seeing. So this is a function, and this function has an input, and then it has an output, but we'll get to this later. So when this when this file is being run, it'll go one by one, and then it'll get to here. So we're saying print the time currently is datetime dot now. So that will use this library down here, and then that will print out an output. Then we're gonna get an input from the user asking how many sides do we want. The random function here essentially acts like a dice. So like if you were to roll a 10-sided dice, the possible values you can get would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., etc. So the point of this project is we are rolling a dice. So we're asking how many sides, and then we're going to get an input from the user and assign that as a number, which is what this int is doing. So then we assign all of that in a user input. And so user input will be like a number, like 10 or 100 or 1,000, etc., etc. So then we're using a special print here. We're using something called printf. You don't really need to use this. I can get rid of it because I didn't really cover it. So instead, I will use the variable. So we're going to say rolling a d plus the user input, which will be a number. So it'll be like rolling a d10 or a d100. So then we're going to get to our function. Remember, code works top to bottom. It should be pretty familiar with you from Scratch. We're going to call the roll function. We're going to give it user input. So user input, remember, is a number. We're going to go over here, and I decided to call this input variable sides. So then I will pick a random number between 1 and whatever sides is equal to. I will store that value in output and then return the output. That output is now stored in ands, the final variable in this program. So I'll go through that one more time. Just this function area, because I think this is probably the most confusing part. So we're going to pick a number from the user. Then user input will be equal to a number. We're going to print out rolling a d plus the number. So like rolling a d10. I've already run it. Oops. Where is that? On line 26. Okay. It'll say rolling a d10. So I remember up here, or I actually deleted it, but remember that I'll go to the top. Remember that 10 is not the same as 10 because one is a word and the other is a number, and I just made that mistake. So my program failed. So if you want to see that error again, because you might encounter this, it'll be something like type error, and then it'll give you the exact line the error happened on. So it said line 26. So I went to line 26 and I realized my error was that it can't be an int, it has to be an str. So an str is a word and an int is a number. I recommend just trying to memorize these. You can always search it up. But over time, it'll make more sense to you. So going through this again, user input is a number, rolling a d, and then a number. And then our function will be given a number as an input. Then I'm using 10 as a temporary variable for right now as a example. So then 10 will go to here, meaning that I'm inputting 10 up here, meaning I'm inputting 10 right here. So I'm inputting 10, sides is now equal to 10. Then Now I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 10 and then return that as an output. I know that probably was a little bit confusing still. Over time, you'll get used to it, and it'll make more sense once you play around with it. So these last two lines, we will print a you rolled a, then I'll use a addition instead of a comma. And so I'll say you rolled a, and then I'll use the number from output. So ands is now equal to output from here. So it'll be something like that. And then so let's say ands is equal to 1. So I'll say you rolled a 1 or a 3 or a 5. And it'll be the same thing. So that should work. And then down here, remember the fire variable is equal to an emoji. So then if we go down here, we're going to say repeat the fire emoji however number times ands was. Remember, ands is a number. So altogether, if I were to say 10, for example, oh, I rolled a 1. And if I were to do it again, I rolled a 7. So it's going to show me the current time. It's going to ask me how many sides I want on my dice. Then it's going to say it's rolling a d10. And then it'll output a random number between 1 through 10. So now I got a 7. And then it's going to repeat the fire emoji exactly 7 times. So that is just a rough outline of some example code that we'll be doing in this Python lesson. It might look a little bit confusing for now, but just like Scratch, everything will make sense eventually. Given that you practice, play around, and try to learn. What I recommend is trying to, first of all, you can always copy this project and play around with it. So let's say I want to say, so let's say I was running a D10. Let's say I want to add 3 to whatever the output is. So let's say I've ordered like say 2 sides. Okay. Okay, sure. We're gonna say 2 sides. It's gonna go here, and it's gonna say 2 plus 3. So it's gonna pick a random number between 1 through 5. So the reason I'm just showing you that is you can just start playing around, see what happens if you were to do different lines of code. So you can do like some random addition. You can make more functions. Like if I wanted to, I could say def do function or what? Yeah. And so now this entire code is now under one function. And so what I can do is just do it multiple times in a row. So if I do 10, it's going to ask me again, and do it again, and then do it again. So you can see how if you just play around with it, you can do a lot of cool stuff. Just try to practice. I understand that this is probably very confusing, but I hope you learned something today. Does anyone have any questions? That will be my lesson for today.
Okay. In that case, I think we should be good for today. Hopefully later on you can provide the slides to them. I think we can talk with Ms. Bindu, but other than that, that should be good for today. So again, just asking again, if anyone has any questions, now would be the time to do so. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. All right, in that case, I think we should be good to go. Thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully you were able to work with this new knowledge and you learned something new. So I think at this point, I think we will be ending the call. Once again, thank you so much for joining. All right, Nihal, I think you can end the recording now.
Sure. Um, how do I do that? Stop.
Okay,
Record.
so I think it should be in the cloud, so we can send it over later. So I think you have the permission